or we facilitate some sort of a digital gig economy where they still have jobs without having the need to migrate to cities.
Yeah.
Right. And if the government is successfully able to execute this, then this would mean that they are able to solve a lot of problems in India. They're able to solve the job problem in India. They're able to solve the problem of overpopulation in cities.
You are listening to Understanding the Future podcast. I am the host Punit Gandhi, and this podcast is developed in association with Climate Center for Cities under the National Institute of Urban Affairs and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. This is a podcast where we discuss about the future of work in the field of climate change, urban development, innovation, and sustainability with the help of leaders and visionaries working on ground as well as in the top management of public and private sector. Our objective is to better understand the future so that we can be prepared and intervene to enable climate actions in the urban areas. Hello everyone, my name is Punit Gandhi, and today we have with us on Understanding Future Dinesh Goyal. He is the founder of Aasan Jobs. Hi Dinesh, and welcome to Understanding Future.
Hi Puneet, thanks for inviting.
Yeah. So Dinesh, if you could just give a brief background about yourself as well as your company Aasan Jobs, that would be great.
So I, along with my co-founders, we started Aasan Jobs in 2014 November. So been almost 5.5 years. The objective of starting the company was, we thought that there is a potential white space in the entry-level hiring in India. So a lot of people in the entry-level jobs were moving online with Jio coming into place. And we thought that this would essentially mean that job search in this category will move from offline classifieds to online classifieds. So we believe that there is a need for creating a digital platform for this category, which was the hypothesis when we started out. And that is something that we have been solving all these years. So we ran the company independently for almost 4.5 years. And eventually we ended up selling it to OLX in December 2018. Currently, we are a part of the OLX group. And we continue with our mission to democratize the job search in the entry-level workforce and to build a solid digital platform that can help these people find relevant job faster.
So the focus of the company still remains the same, or it has changed in certain ways?
So it is still the same. The focus had always been to build a large platform for the entry-level job category in India, which continues to be the focus even being a part of the OLX group.
Okay. So what were the major challenges that you faced while creating such an ecosystem? Because when we are talking about blue collar and gray collar jobs that you are referring to, how do you bring them on board on a digital infrastructure, and what did happen, what challenges you faced, and how did you overcome those things?
So I think the challenges for us had been very similar as probably any technology platform has seen over the last 5 years. So when we started out in November 2014, while smartphone penetration was increasing in India, internet was still not very cheap. It was a belief that somebody will come in, maybe a government entity or a private player, which will actually make internet cheap. So for the initial years, our cost of acquiring the job seeker was very high because the job seeker was essentially not available online. And after a couple of years, Jio came into being and internet actually became cheap. So that solved the first major problem as a technology company, that while we are trying to create a digital ecosystem, are your users actually available online?
True.
Right? But in principle, that is not something we solved. That was an ecosystem problem that automatically got solved.
Okay.
Then the second issue that we faced for probably another year and a half is around technology adoption. So while internet access has been provided to the job seekers, their understanding of technology was not great in the beginning. So we did anticipate that it will move in a very obvious way, right? Where the consumers first start using easy to use and high engagement mobile apps, which typically end up being chat applications, for example, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and so on. This is generally followed by social media. So then you move on to the likes of a Facebook or probably Instagram or things like TikTok that people find easy to use. Then the third category generally becomes your e-commerce and jobs is like an e-commerce platform, right? So then people start like looking for jobs online, then eventually they start shopping online and so on. So it is actually a gradual trend that educates people in terms of how to use technology.
Okay.
So we started seeing this somewhere towards the end of 2018, when people started having decent bit of comfort in using jobs platform.
Yeah.
And now we are moving on to the next thing, where it is about how do you reach to people in tier 2 and tier 3 cities as compared to just focusing on tier 1 cities. So the problems have kept on evolving based on what is a phase the company is in. So earlier we were in a product market phase. Currently we're in a growth phase. So we're trying to figure out how to build a product that is useful for ever increasing number of users.
True. So are you currently in pan India or major metro cities, or what is the focus area of the company as of now?
So we operate pan India, but majority of the business is still in metro cities. So I'll say that about 70% would be in metro cities. Not even metro cities, I'll actually say tier 1 cities, the top 10 cities in India.
Okay.
And 30% will be in the rest of the cities.
Okay. So what is the inhibition for tier 2, tier 3 cities to come on board? What do you see over there?
So there is no inhibition per se, but tier 2 cities generally do not have enough business. So tier 2 cities have a smaller ecosystem in terms of number of jobs, and hence starting a tier 2 city is generally not very profitable for any company, right? And not just the jobs company. So from a priority standpoint, we thought that first we will hit all the large cities in India, and then we'll start moving to the tier 2 cities.
Okay. And you're working pan India, but then you're slowly moving towards tier 2, tier 3 as the market opens up for you guys, I'm assuming.
Correct.
Okay. So you specifically deal a lot with blue collar and gray collar jobs. Any specific reason for that was there, or were you not looking for white collar?
No, so we wanted to solve the volume hiring problem.
Okay.
So we wanted to get into a category where a lot of people are actually looking for jobs, even though probably the revenue that you will make will not be substantial per transaction. Into mass market segment in the jobs category. Now the mass market segment in India is the entry level, which is typically a blue gray collar workforce, which is there.
Yeah. Okay. And are they sustaining themselves on these jobs? It is a volumes based job, but then I'm also assuming that the opportunities and the number of people might also be imbalanced. So they might constantly be moving around. So they might be that, okay, if someone else is paying me better money, I'll go towards that. If they're not paying me, I'll stay with this company as soon as I feel that, okay, this is done. Because this is eventually a contracts job. It is not something that they are hired full time at a lot of places. So how does that function out? That do you see a lot of people shifting a lot of jobs, or do you see that there is a stability in such kind of growth market as well for such jobs?
So definitely stability is an issue. However, there are multiple factors which are at play because of which the stability becomes questionable.
Okay.
Right? So a lot of hiring is basically seasonal hiring. So if you look at the hiring trends in India, then there is a clear spike in October, November, which is the big festival season in India. So logistics companies, fintech companies, they will hire in large numbers, while your Q2, which is July to September, is generally the dullest in the year in terms of hiring, right? Because you do not have any particular consumer spending trends in Q2. So this becomes one reason. A lot of these people are actually migrants from different towns and villages. So they would prefer to spend certain number of months in a city and then come back to the village, do farming for a few months, and then come back to the city again.
Interesting.
Right. So that's another trend we will generally see. Salaries typically tend to be low. And if somebody offers probably, let's say 500 more, so 500 more typically translates into 4 to 5% of somebody's salary. So that becomes large enough incentive for people to actually switch jobs. So the stability is generally very, very poor, and people do not continue to stick around for multiple reasons. Salaries also generally do not rise a lot, except for few segments that become hot. So, for example, over the last few years, delivery boys as a category has become very, very hot.
Okay.
Salaries in this segment has picked up.
Yeah.
But in general, entry level, the salaries are fairly constant. They do not pick up significantly. A lot of the hike is actually linked with the government revising minimum wages in a particular state.
Okay.
Right? And that somewhere, I'll say that somewhere is something that needs to change. So while we do see salary increment happen at a white collar level, at least to the extent of the yearly inflation which is there, that is not a trend that we see at an entry level, which
Okay.
at least in my view it should change, and there should be reasonable salary hike that should happen at entry level also year on year.
Yeah. Let's, for the audience, at least also define what are the current different types of blue collar and gray collar and white collar jobs that you guys deal with, so that they are aware more about it.
So very, very heavy focus is on logistics. So we do a lot of delivery boys, warehouse executives, pickers, packers, loaders, etc. We do a lot of sales hiring as well, which are typically your field sales executives. We do a lot of voice hiring as well, which is a telecallers, customer care, etc.
Yeah.
Entry-level office jobs, data entry, back office, accountants, etc.
Yeah.
So I think across these segments, we would cover about 85 to 90% of what we do. Then
Okay.
there are certain like specialist roles which are also entry level. So for example, in diagnostics, you will have a phlebotomist as a role, right? So
Yeah.
people who go at home and collect blood and all. So these are just specialized categories of various roles,
Okay.
which will largely constitute the rest of the work that we do.
Okay. Okay. And how do you see this jobs changing in future? Because yes, for delivery and all, I still don't see a lot of tech coming in and drones flying around in India, at least. Maybe in other parts of the world it might be possible, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here. But how do you see tech kind of intervening with such kind of blue collar and gray collar jobs in future?
Is this in context with what has happened because of COVID or in general?
In general.
Got it. So, from an India context, I think two things will come into play. And one trend has actually started happening. I'll say that been 4 or 5 years now. So, gig economy has started picking up in India, right?
Yeah.
And the major reason why the gig economy started picking up was employers were looking at ways in which they can have a back to back arrangement with the employee. Right? So
Okay.
instead of talking about a fixed salary model, can I talk about that? You know what, you deliver one packet for me, and I will pay you a certain amount of money for that packet.
Yeah.
So in that case, I have a back-to-back arrangement with the employee, and if it delivers, then he makes the money. If it does not deliver, then as a company, I do not have any headache of having any fixed cost on my book. Right? So that
Yeah.
was the core hypothesis, and this actually started picking up globally after the 2008 crisis. And in the 2008 crisis, post the 2008 crisis, there was a problem where companies were looking to reduce their fixed cost, but people were also looking to increase their income. So they
Yeah.
started doing some sort of freelancing work where they can be paid per assignment that they do. And that resulted in a lot of interesting companies come up. So Airbnb and Uber both started in 2009, 2010. And both are example of people trying to make extra money because now the cash is low. Right? So that's almost 10 to 12 years that this concept started. It started picking up in India to some extent with Uber and Ola scaling up in India. But the concept started becoming even more popular with the food tech companies hiring delivery boys on a per delivery kind of a model. And ever since, there has been a debate going on that does it make sense, does it not make sense? And because of COVID, I think that debate has actually increased because
Yeah.
now people are talking about does it really make sense to have employees in a gig format, or should there be some sort of a social security that companies should take care of, which might be like a provident fund or a health insurance, etc., etc. So my understanding and my view based on the entire thing, especially because of COVID, I think two things will happen. One, I think gig economy is here to stay. So while the government will push for certain social security measures, I think those social security measures will be built as a layer on top of the gig payouts. So
Okay.
now a logistics company will hire a delivery boy and say that I will continue to pay you as per like per delivery, But on top of that, I will probably take care of like some provident fund and some health insurance in addition to it. But
Okay.
I will still not commit any fixed salary to you because I'm not keen to have a fixed cost on my book. Because of COVID, companies have also had a very bad run, and they're also bleeding massively on the cash flow.
True.
So I think gig economy is here to stay, and that is not going to change. However, there will be a layer of like social security norms that will come in because of the government intervention. I think the second interesting trend that will start coming up in India. So because of COVID, people have realized that it is possible to work remotely. Right. So now, one key thing that had happened in India after Geo was a lot of people got access to internet, and internet is actually very very cheap in India, and decently speeded internet which is there. But people never believed that is it possible to have a workforce that works in like a completely remote manner and still deliver results. Now,
Yeah.
companies in the valley and companies globally generally tried the remote working culture even pre-COVID,
Yeah.
but companies in India had generally been reluctant to do this at least before COVID. Now they have no choice and they have to do it. But one trend that I anticipate will come along, and I see a lot of entrepreneurs talk about it, is India has a lot of people,
Yeah.
and a lot of these people stay in tier two, tier three towns and villages. And now most of them have access to internet, at least on mobile.
Yeah.
Can you have a platform that can make use of this massive workforce to deliver gig kind of tasks for which they can be paid? Right. So very, very small tasks that can be delivered over internet. People can look over those tasks on the mobile phone. They
But
can
are you here talking about specifically white collar jobs, if I'm not wrong, or are you even talking about blue and gray?
So I'll not have a definition to that. So basically, the hypothesis that at least till now, what gig economy has meant is you have people who do physical tasks in a gig format, right? So you will have a driver who will drive the car for you,
Yeah.
right? Or you will have a delivery boy who will deliver the food for you.
Yeah.
Gig tasks that are not essentially physical but that are digital will now start coming up.
Huh.
Right? So digital gig task is something that will come up. That
Yeah.
might be an entry level task, right? Or that might be a white collar task. For example, if you have to moderate the images, product images uploaded on Amazon,
Yeah.
right? For me, it will be very similar to what a entry level moderator will do for Amazon sitting out of its office. It is just that now there is a third person who's probably sitting in a tier two town and executing the same task, or it might be a white collar gig as well. White collar gigs have typically been around for some time now.
Yeah.
Blue collar gigs have not been around at scale. But I think what the world will see is digital blue collar or probably digital entry level gigs that will become popular, and utilizing the massive workforce that exists in India in
Yeah.
tier two, tier three towns and villages.
But okay, that's very interesting for me. So my whole concept of gig and what I think about gig is that there are two forms of gig economy where one is entry level. We are talking about blue collar and gray collar jobs. In that jobs particularly, you see a lot of people moving from rural to urban to specifically do the job that you were just mentioning before, while the whole digital economy or digital gig economy we are talking about, that is the freelancers market, and I have been part of it as well to a certain extent. I do it because it's the comfort of my home that I get, that I don't have to move out anywhere. I can still do it from home and I can still continue as it is. But as you are saying that there will be now a digital gig economy for entry level jobs as well, and in that case they will also not have to move from rural to urban sector. That is what I'm implying here. And what all other kinds, so one is if you are putting a picture on Amazon, but what all other kinds of job you are specifically looking there which falls under such categories that you expect?
So, the broad level hypothesis is that jobs that do not need a lot of training, jobs that involve small tasks that can be completed, and jobs that can be completed just over the internet is in principle what can be done. Right now, these can be like pure play digital jobs, which are like moderation jobs of content across various platforms. So
Yeah.
image moderation is one, but for example, all technology platforms go through content moderation, which is there,
Yeah.
right? These can be basic Excel jobs where you're required to clean up some sort of data. These can be some sort of lead management jobs where you have to enhance the amount of data that is available for a particular lead, for a sales process, and so on. These can be basic calling jobs where probably there is a distributed customer care setup and the calls are allocated to people who are there in the like tier 2 towns and cities,
Yeah.
uh, which need very, very basic level of training. So somebody will attend a customer care call and then he will upload the status on a mobile app and so on. But in principle, jobs that are easy to do and require very, very basic training is something that can be built on such a platform. Now, some of these kind of platforms have existed for quite some time. Amazon does something like this called Mechanical Turk in US, not in India. But I have not seen a successful platform in India. The question is that because of COVID and because of how internet has moved in India and because of the fact that now all of us have learned that it is possible to work from home, it is possible to work remotely, will such a shift come along?
Yeah.
Right. So my entire problem with how the setup looks like in tier 2, tier 3 towns, and very relevant to the question also that you asked, that uh, why do we do 70% of our work in tier 1 cities and only 30% in tier 2, tier 3?
Yeah.
Right. The problem is that there are not enough job opportunities in tier 2, tier 3. So the ecosystem is not very large. The number of jobs is fairly limited. And
Yeah.
because of this, for a company like us to move there is a difficult thing to do because it does not make financial sense. Now, generating job opportunities in a physical world where we talk about things like starting an infrastructure project or starting a manufacturing company or setting up a physical customer care center is a time consuming task. So
Yeah.
while all of this can be done, and I'm sure that the central government and respective state governments are trying to do it to generate the jobs closer to where the people actually live, it is going to be a long drawn process. A much faster process is if the jobs can be created digitally,
Yeah.
which is a bet where I think that, like the 2008 crisis that resulted in the start of a gig economy, this crisis will actually push the digital gig economy instead of the physical gig economy. And that will actually give a significant boost to jobs in like tier 2, tier 3, and villages. And that might just solve a lot of issues that we face as a country. So, for
Okay.
example, a lot of migration to cities happen because people are not able to get a job in their town and villages.
Yeah.
Right? So if that is cut out, and if people are able to work remotely and they're able to earn a living while still being in their hometown and city, the migration will get reduced. The load that these cities face, that will get reduced. So it's
Absolutely.
a good. It's just an anticipation that it should happen, but it is anybody's guess if that will actually come along well.
Okay, so if that is the case, then my understanding also then goes towards that. Okay, if that has to happen, or we have to shift to such kind of ecosystem, or we want to move such kind of ecosystem, a lot of training institutes needs to come into place in tier 2, tier 3 cities to make sure that there is a fast growing skill set in places over there, so that such kind of jobs can be picked up.
Not really. So I don't think you need physical training centers for these, right? So
Okay.
so basically it's a catch-22 situation. You would typically need physical training centers where you will need to train people for a significantly long period of time.
Yeah.
So if you have to train people on basic stuff, then that training should ideally happen digitally.
Okay.
Right? So there can be online training companies that can generate digital content, publish it, and then people can get trained by consuming that content.
Okay.
It should work beautifully if the training requirement is, let us say, 4 to 8 hours, that you get trained for 4 to 8 hours and then you're equipped well enough to start doing the task.
Okay.
In case you need training, which is like 30 to 40 hours of training to start doing the task, then that will not really be a scalable thing from a digital gig economy standpoint, because that would in principle mean that for you to do every new gig, you need to invest a significant amount of time and effort in getting trained for it.
Okay.
Right? And that actually kills the pace at which the digital gigs can move. So I would not really think that there is a need for physical training centers, but there is an absolute need for online companies or digital companies that can train these people to deliver whatever is the gig they're required to do on the platform.
Okay. Is it basically because of cost of training and everything that then goes in is not affordable for the company? I'm assuming that is a major issue if it is 30 to 40 hours of training.
Yeah, so it's actually both things. So cost is definitely there, but I think more than the cost, it's really the lead time to get started on something, right? So, for example, if I have to invest 40 hours in getting trained for a task, right, then I would want to be sure that by getting trained for such a task, I should be at least able to make 10 to 15,000 every month consistently for a year.
Yeah.
Right. Probably I should be able to make 1.5 lakhs to 2 lakhs
I
a
would
year.
say it would be a bit lower because it's tier 2, tier 3.
Probably. So maybe not 10 to 15,000, but let us say 8 to 10,000.
Yeah.
That I would hope that by investing so much time in getting trained for a skill, I should be able to earn this much for at least a year, 8 to 10,000 every month for at least a year. And that in principle does not really work very well for a gig kind of an ecosystem.
Okay.
So in a gig kind of an ecosystem, you need tasks that are very, very simple to perform. Anybody could probably learn like doing that in probably 1 to 2 hours or max probably 3 to 4 hours or 8 hours, and then start doing it. So while tasks that will need a slightly longer training, 30 to 40, they would also be there, but they will not actually form the cornerstone of how the platform will scale.
Okay.
Right. And even with these kind of trainings, I would probably like to believe that training institutes should do a digital setup instead of a physical setup.
Yeah.
A physical setup might not make a lot of sense for them from a cost standpoint.
True.
So going to a tier 2 town and a tier 3 town where the population is not very large, and then setting up a training institute to like start training people, it might not be cost effective at scale.
That can be workshop model. If means I have to go into that whole ecosystem. It can be like, okay, every week we are doing one workshop here, then second workshop in another city, third workshop in another city. So
right.
My only thought process over here is that we are increasing training from 1 day to maybe 3 or 5 days. That 3 or 5 days might have a bigger impact on long term. That okay, I understand that you cannot get a sustained yearly income, but if you can get sustained 8 to 9 months of income also every year, that might be an interesting proposition for them. That maybe that 4 months that they are not getting, which might be some rainy season or something, accordingly seasonal jobs can be looked into tier 2 tier 3 cities as well, which is a high probability a seasonal jobs in tier 2 tier 3 city. So I'm not sure. I'm just trying to work around that.
No, absolutely. I think that makes sense. The only thing that I probably think might happen is that digital adoption in the training space might also be high. So the ultimate model that might succeed, it might be like an online plus an offline model, where you're delivering a large piece of content in an online way. But there is also physical touch point, which can be in the form of workshops or probably seminars that happen in these towns and cities, where that ends up becoming a physical touch point for these people. So absolutely, that can definitely be there.
Okay. So we have talked a lot about entry level jobs. Now coming to the more managerial professional job roles. India is now moving towards freelancing jobs, more skilled labor, high skilled labor jobs. And where do you see that kind of gig economy growing in India? Because till now we have mainly had export based gig economy, if I'm not wrong. A lot of export of service was happening as a freelancer and everything. How will the internal gig economy of the Indian market itself will frame around, if you can shed some light on it?
So this is specifically related to white collar, you're saying?
Yeah. This is specifically to white collar.
Right. So I think it has been an interesting space, but one that is fairly difficult to answer conclusively how it will actually pan out. So while the gig economy has been picking up in India, it has also been picking up in other parts of the world. So there are a lot of freelancers from India, but of late, a lot of freelancers have started coming up in, for example, Eastern European countries, which have started providing high quality engineers and designers, technology developers, and so on. Good number of people have started coming up in Philippines, Vietnam, and so on. So I think it's while it is booming, it will continue to be a tough segment for India. Generally, there are few trends that we see. So one trend is when companies abroad they decide to outsource tasks in an organized manner. So they will not really catch hold of a freelancer, but they will catch hold of an outsourcing company who will execute a complete operation for them.
Yeah.
And these kind of operations typically are tech support operations, or they are like customer care operations and so on. And while conventionally India has had a good proportion of business in these segments, largely because of people who could speak English fluently and a high proportion of English speaking people in cities in South and cities like Indore, etc., etc. Of late, a trend that we have seen is a lot of these jobs have started going to other Southeast Asian countries. So
Okay.
countries like Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, etc., they have started picking up a major share of these jobs from India. There are multiple factors because of which this is happening. So while the ease of doing business in India has gone up, certain countries have actually made it way easier compared to India, and like getting a license and to help foreign companies start these centers in their own countries. So, for example, Vietnam has recently picked up a lot of customer care setups from India. And the ease of doing business in Vietnam, at least what I have heard from global companies, is significantly better compared to India. So that's one trend. The proportion of English speaking population in these countries has also started going up. So I think it's going to be a tough answer, at least in this kind of a segment. For the IT segment, again, there is a competition that India is facing. So a bit of that competition is in Eastern Europe, some bit of competition is in Southeast Asia, while India still continues to be significantly ahead in terms of IT outsourcing.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the second segment which is there. Now, once you move from structured outsourcing programs and you move on to individual freelancers who will probably just do a task for you, and they will not go to a company, and then there are foreign companies who want to sort of engage with you. That trend is also picking up in India. There are a lot more people who are willing to take up freelancer jobs, and typically multiple reasons are there. But one reason that at least we have seen pick up in the recent years is freedom to work. So people do not want to be constrained with a 8 hours job. They do not want to be constrained with like coming to the office on a daily basis. They want to sort of work out of remote locations. They want to have flexible work timings. And generally the payment that global companies pay is significantly higher compared to what the Indian companies pay. So the per hour rate is like significantly higher, and people do want to enjoy this kind of a work setup at least for a few years. So we have seen a lot of people drop out of jobs and do this for 2 to 3 to 4 years, have fun at work, enjoy, and generate significant amount of money as well. But after this period, they typically come back to a proper job, because as a freelancer, you do not really have a career. Right? So there is no career trajectory that is there. You will always end up being an individual contributor.
Yeah.
And as an individual contributor, there is only so much money that you can make, and there are only so many problems that you can solve. While if you look from an aspirational standpoint, you want to improve your financial takeaways and you want to solve different problems, you want to solve challenging problems. A lot of people aspire to move into managerial roles. And these are generally not things that you get as a freelancer. So people tend to have like 2 to 3 to 4 years in their career when they take up these jobs because of how lucrative they are and how flexible they are. But after that, they come back to a proper corporate job and then they start going up. Overall, we believe that this trend is going to go up significantly. COVID has actually pushed this trend even further. Companies globally are also facing a cash crunch. So for them, they also want to outsource the job because for them, it's just cheaper to get something done in India compared to getting it done from their own country. A lot of interesting tools have come up that facilitate remote working, which did not exist earlier. people have got into the habit of remote working and delivering productively while working remotely. So all these are positive signals for the freelancing or gig economy in the white collar segment for India.
Yeah. Okay. So coming to one of the second last, I'll say I might have one more after this, but you are coming from a recruiting background, and how do you see that changing with this whole change of gig economy? How will recruiting as well as job search will change with time when this gig economy keeps on increasing? And I would prefer for both, something on entry level as well as something for white collar. What do you see over there?
So there are few good changes that we anticipate will come along. So recruitment, fundamentally, we have believed has in general been an extremely inefficient process. That's a problem globally, not just in India. In India, it just ends up being extremely inefficient, right? So candidate typically has to go through multiple rounds of interviews. There is no formal tracking of feedback.
Yeah.
Feedback really does not pass from one round to another. You might end up interviewing for a lot of companies before you actually get a final offer. And there are significant challenges on the other side also, which the companies face. So I think one interesting thing that we hope will come along is automation.
Okay.
Right? So people would want to get in a mode where they will say that, you know what, if 50% of the recruitment decision can be made without actually talking to the candidate, let us try to get into that mode. Right? So can we have better assessments? Can we have recorded interview feedbacks? And if yes, then that significantly saves time for the recruiter, or that significantly saves time for the employer. So that's one interesting trend that we anticipate will come along. The second interesting trend is people in general have been extremely fuzzy about face-to-face interviews. Right? So we have never been a big fan of that, because we always believe that a video interview is probably as good as a physical interview.
Yeah.
Right? While there might be some shortcomings which are there, but as an employer, I should be okay to live with it, just to save the candidate any hassle to travel to the interview location.
True.
And you can invite the candidate to travel once you are reasonably confident that you're going to make an offer. So given that there was no choice in the lockdown and hiring had to go on, people have started now moving on to telephonic interviews and video interviews. And this, I think, is going to be a very interesting trend that will continue in the future. And this will save significant amount of money for both the candidate and the employer in terms of travel cost and travel time. Right? So that's another thing that we are anticipating will come along. Third, I think there will be a surge of work from home jobs, and there will be a surge of remote jobs. Companies are thinking on lines of how to optimize their cost. So they're trying to figure out ways like, instead of calling everyone to the office 5 days a week, can I have a roster format where probably each person visits the office for only 3 days a week, and I can take up a smaller office space instead of a very, very large office space that I had to probably take. The number of jobs is still debatable. There are few trends that make us believe that the number of jobs will go down. So in principle, there will be a job loss. But there are also few trends that make us believe that they will go up. So I think net, it will even out. So we hope that there will be a lot more jobs created in the digital ecosystem, which might be e-commerce or probably food tech, etc., etc. But the number of jobs from the physical ecosystem will go out. Right? So the number of sales jobs might actually go down. Salespeople might start doing a lot of their meetings online. That will facilitate and help them do a lot more meetings per salesperson, etc. So difficult to comment on that. I think net, it should remain the same, and there should not be any significant difference that should probably come along. Yeah, I think those would be the major trends that we anticipate in the recruitment ecosystem.
Okay. And then coming to the last question, we have already spoken about short training courses for in rural area, but other different kinds of skill sets. So what do you think will be core in future when we are looking at maybe a blue collar or gray collar job as well as white collar job? That what kind of skill sets would be essential in long run? And I'm talking about maybe 10 to 20 years down the line when AI is actually already embedded in the system, ML is embedded, you have VR, drones are already there. Hopefully at that time, I'm not sure to what extent it will be there, but somewhere on those lines.
So for the white collar segment, technology will be very, very important. And that had been and that continues to be one advice that I give people, that try to see if you can actually move towards the technology domain. Now, this technology domain might be AI, ML, blockchain kind of technologies that will progressively become way more important as the world moves towards automation, smart systems, and more intelligent systems that can actually help the world operate more efficiently. And probably one trend that I see is that in cities, you will generally have people who are working on white collar technologies because the cost of living in a city is very high. And companies would typically end up paying very high salaries if they set up offices in the cities.
Yeah.
And that would essentially mean that they would only want to recruit the high end skill set workforce based out of a city, right? So that's one. A lot of jobs will actually get automated. So if you're doing a job that does not involve any significant decision making, and that's a very let's say cut copy paste kind of a job,
Yeah.
they will start getting automated significantly. They're already getting automated, but I think that trend will become even more pronounced in 5 to 10 years. Image processing, for example, is picking up very, very fast. Right?
Yeah.
So data entry also will sort of become obsolete. A lot of jobs that are related to responding to emails and basically back office kind of jobs, they will end up becoming redundant.
Yeah.
Because AI will essentially facilitate like sending out replies to emails in an automated manner and so on. Jobs that still need some bit of decision making and some bit of communication, they would essentially happen in a very, very distributed manner. So companies might not be willing to take up a permanent office space for these kind of jobs in the future. Right now, these can typically be customer care jobs or sales jobs, etc., which might run on a digital gig economy kind of a format, right? And to actually excel in these kind of jobs, you would need communication skills that have to be like paramount, right? So good English speaking skills, good skills in speaking in local languages, and so on. Good skills in terms of talking to other people, right? So you can say sales skills is something that would be required, and this is one consistent training that at least we push people to take up continuously, that if you're good at selling things or if you've gone through a proper structured sales training program, then in general you have a skill that a lot of companies will find relevant. So skills that are fairly objective, they will end up getting automated, and probably they will not have a place in a world 10 or 15 years from now.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think that was quite insightful on a very good level from bottom to top. Any specific comments or things you would like to talk about gig economy, you can share it as well.
So thanks, Puneet. I think very, very insightful conversation and fairly good questions that would probably answer some of the trends that will come up in India. Probably a few overarching points. So I think one, government will have a significant role to play in creating this ecosystem effectively. I think India is at a very, very interesting situation where a lot of people in India have access to internet. Yeah. And a lot of people in India will be able to execute tasks sitting at their home. Now, the question is that can a country like India leverage its massive workforce quickly? So when you look at trends of what Japan managed to do after the Second World War and what China managed to do after 1980, they were able to create a large manufacturing economy. Interestingly, these countries were able to move very, very fast, set up a lot of factories in their remote areas, and make sure that all of the people in these remote areas are able to get a job. Now, for a country like India, which has a population similar in size to China, there are only two options. Either we create infrastructure which is developed at a fast enough pace in these remote areas, tier 2 towns, cities, and villages, so that a lot of people in these areas have access to jobs, or we facilitate some sort of a digital gig economy where they still have jobs without having the need to migrate to cities.
Yeah.
Right. And if the government is successfully able to execute this, then this would mean that they are able to solve a lot of problems in India. They're able to solve the job problem in India. They're able to solve the problem of overpopulation in cities. They're able to solve a problem where the cities are overstretched for resources because a small city is like supporting like a 2x kind of a population. So I think very, very interesting situation for the government. So while private companies and private players will continue to do this, government can actually like have a very, very significant impact in this segment. And if they're able to get this right, then our trajectory towards chasing China just becomes better.
And so just coming to that point, so what do you think? What kind of situation do you see? Like, okay, I do understand government needs to push it, and they are pushing it, I think, through Atmanirbhar or Make in India and things like that as well. But what other kinds of policy or what other kinds of job sectors do you think can be pushed from the government side to make sure that such things can be actually scaled up?
So I think one key thing that the government should start looking at is the ease of doing business itself, right? And we should be very, very transparent about it. So while we are very happy that certain companies are shifting their base from China to India, we should take a lot more pragmatic view and see that how many companies have actually come to India versus how many companies have moved to Vietnam.
Yeah.
Right. So key question that the government needs to answer is, we are a country of 1.3 billion people, and there is a massive youth workforce that enters into like the job space every year where they're looking for a job. How do you facilitate that all these people are able to get a job in a meaningful manner?
Sure.
So one key problem to solve is that how do you make sure that India has a lot of jobs? Yeah. And to answer that, you need to make it very, very easy for companies to actually set up, like start operating in India, right? So while the government has done a lot over the last 8 to 10 years, there is still a long way to go in that, right? Companies should feel welcome. Companies should be able to see a red carpet that the government of India is welcoming us to set up our shops in India, and so that we can provide jobs to people in India. So I think that's going to be a very key factor, whether you're looking for a physical job setup in these areas or probably digital job setup. So that's one key problem to solve. The second is the training setups need to be more meaningful. Again, the government has done a significant job in that over the last 8 to 10 years. But can we actually facilitate companies that do digital training in a meaningful manner? Or they do training that can ultimately result in people getting a job? Can the government start investing in these companies? Can the government move faster in identifying these companies and so on? So that can the government actually facilitate creation of these ecosystems?
Yeah.
Can the government start appointing nodal officers in each of these tier 2 towns and cities and villages that do a way more effective job compared to what the employment exchanges have been doing? So the job of an employment exchange has been very, very similar, that they need to make sure that these people are, that almost everyone who is looking for a job is able to get a job, but their effectiveness is extremely questionable. So can the government start making them more effective? And I think a lot of other similar things can be done, which will actually facilitate. The government started giving some subsidies. I think this is almost 4 or 5 years back, to set up customer care outlets in tier 2 towns. And I think the government identified some 15 tier 2 cities for that. So that's a very positive move. But because of that, I know a lot of large customer care companies go to these cities and start operating in these cities. So moves like these are very, very helpful. So can the government set up, let's say, an IT zone in an upcoming city that can attract a lot of engineers and designers to work in those cities? Right? Can the government give tax benefits for companies for operating in these cities? Right? So a lot of policies similar to what Bangalore did when it was coming up, what Hyderabad did when it was coming up. All these need to be thought through well, and all these need to be executed well at a quick enough pace to help build an ecosystem that goes beyond just the top 10 cities in India. Right? Because India, unlike most of the countries, is not a 10-city country. Sure. So India can't operate like a country in Europe where there are very few cities with 1 million population. Given the number of cities that have a large population, somebody needs to figure out how to control migration and create job opportunities where the job seeker is. True. And the best person to do that is the government.
True. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. I think that was very insightful on all different levels. And I think audience would enjoy it as well. Thank you, Dinesh.
Thanks, Puneet.
You have been listening to Understanding the Future podcast. To know more about Climate Center for Cities, visit us at www.c-q.niua.org and follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. The show is conceptualized, hosted, and produced by Punit Gandhi. You can listen to the show on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Spotify. So don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. Thank you and stay tuned for the next episode.